First, we have a very revealing look at the impact the pandemic had on the American workforce. In a new survey from CNBC, millions of Americans who were laid off during the pandemic ended up returning to work at a different company and in different roles. The new CNBC All-America Workforce Survey also found that 57% of people who retired during the pandemic did so after being laid off.
For more on this, this week, CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Liesman. Steve, I'm so glad you're here, man.
We got a lot of questions.
We got a lot of questions, and I know that you have the answers.
And about the economy.
This has been, Steve, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. I've been through. I'm fairly old. I remember the recessions in the 70s. I remember the 80s. I've never seen an economy like this. We've got what, 3.5, 3.6% unemployment. Right. We've got more open jobs than ever before. Mika and I, when we were driving around last summer, last fall, would see signs that's like Burger King, we'll pay you $1,000 if you come work for us. You read all of these stories about people who will hire new recruits and they just won't show up for work.
Our lobster guy.
The guy that owns a lobster place, I wouldn't call him our lobster guy.
He's our friend.
But he'd say that he'd have to pay people $22, $23 an hour for something that was minimum wage 2 or 3 years ago. And people would just call him up and say, hey, no, I'm just not coming to work for a week or two.
He had 17-year-olds working.
And he'd say, so against that crazy, bizarre backdrop, and with Jamie Dimon saying a hurricane's coming, What's the workforce looking like in this survey, and what do you expect over the next 3 to 6 months?
Well, I'm happy to play your economic therapist right here live on national television.
Please do.
Where I'd point out the following. If you're not confused, you're not paying attention. You should be confused. This is one of the most interesting times. I've been doing this for a couple, 3 decades now. Interesting times that I've ever had to report about what's going on in these vast forces that are out there. You have this 3.6% unemployment rate. And yet people really look past that and say, you know what, that's not important to me. What's important to me is the inflation numbers and the chance of recession coming up. What we tried to do here was look at the big changes that the pandemic brought about in the workforce. 28% of those who are employed were laid off during it. But now look at the concerns for those employed. I guess that's up on the screen there. 83% are worried about a recession. 74% are worried their wages not keeping pace with inflation. Meanwhile, 80% are satisfied with their jobs. 60% think they can leave their job now and find another job. So their confidence right now in their job security is very, very high. And something like a third or 20% right now are actually looking actively for work in the job they have. And the other thing we see, we have all these comments, is that health played a very big role and continues to play a very big role in putting people out of the workforce, sending them to retirement, and creating concerns about coming back. But the good news is a good portion say they would consider coming back if the pay was right, the hours were right, and they had the right job.
And so that's what I wanted. The next question I wanted to ask you, that as my economics therapist, and God knows I've needed one for a very long time. I really don't understand all of these numbers and crazy things that are thrown out there. But I do know this, that I saw a headline last week that unemployment has reached an all-time low in 17 states. Is that why we keep reading stories even after all of the stimulus money dried up at COVID, where you read one report after another where people go, yeah, you know what, I don't like my job. I don't think I'm going to go back to work. And those are the quotes. That's not me being like the guy with Monopoly with like a monocle on and money bags. That's what people are saying to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNBC. They're like, yeah, I don't like my job. I don't think I'm going to go back to work. That's, again, something new. What's that about?
I mean, look, for many, many decades in this country, this was really an employer's market. we were headed, I think, over time to a market that was more balanced toward the employee because of demographics, the aging of society. We've also made some choices in this country, Joe, in terms of immigration, right? We've decided to reduce immigration, both in the Trump administration and somewhat continued in the Biden administration, about reducing the number of legal immigrants here. So that reduces the workforce. All of that means it's a much tighter job market. There are 11.4 million unfilled jobs in this country. And by the way, that's about 6 million more than we normally run. So it's a very tight job market. It is a time where if you have the right skills, you can do a couple things. You can bargain for a better salary, find a better job, and maybe make working at home part of the job that you agree to, because more and more Americans do that. And when we look, by the way, Joe, at people working from home, they tend to be more satisfied with both their job and their wages.
Steve, I'm going to hop into this therapy session. I don't know what your hourly rate is, but Joe's paying, so let's keep going here. When you look around at the economy, and as you said, the workers, employees have all the power right now. There are a lot of people who are saying, I don't want to do that job anymore. I didn't like that job. I'm above that job. I can get a better job for more money over here. What does that mean structurally for our economy when you have so many people, housekeeping, busboys, all those kind of things? People just say, I'm not doing that anymore. And who could blame them?
Well, structurally, it should mean we're more productive in the sense that you'll have more people in jobs that are better qualified for, in the sense that they have time to look for jobs. One thing we found, by the way, is that the unemployment benefits that were paid, they did allow people to stay out of work longer than otherwise, but it did also allow them to spend more time looking for the right job. I mean, you had people before, and still to this day, obviously, who take jobs that they didn't necessarily want, weren't the perfect fit. So now people move around. There is, though, I think, some loss here in the sense that you have employers complain about hiring somebody, and then all of a sudden they move on to another job before they're able to be hired. Although right now, I will say we're getting a little bit of sense of a little bit of weakness in the job market from concern about the recession. We've heard about some offers that had been rescinded, especially, by the way, in the tech world, which was flying very high and now seems to be coming back down to work. So I would say watch this space in terms of what's happening. There could be some softness coming in the job market, but it has a long way to go to be a difficult job market. We're, as Joe was talking about, near the all-time low in the unemployment rate. The job market is very tight right now. Wages have been relatively strong, although on average not keeping pace with inflation. And I hope you guys all feel just a little bit better after this session.
A little bit. A little bit. I'm curious, Steve, what you're hearing and reading and hearing, though, from CEOs about remote work. And I want to venture into very dangerous territory here, because this is ultimately like a dream for some working women, probably most working women, because you can really establish that balance and do it all if you want. A hybrid might be a best case scenario. But what kind of impact are you hearing from, major companies, the heads of major companies, about the quality of the work that's being done, the quality of communication between employees, shared interests, shared goals, and also mentoring?
When productivity.
I think we're trying to figure this stuff out. I've talked to bosses and they say there are some workers who do quite well at home, some who do not. There are some managers who do well managing people when they're at home, and some managers who do not. Paris thought that a manager is not necessarily doing the perfect job here. So the idea is, I think we're trying to figure this stuff out. It was really interesting. All of this technology was more or less available before the pandemic. Pandemic comes along, we realize there's a whole bunch of jobs that we can do from home. What is interesting about this data that we found is we're establishing a kind of new elite workforce. We had our pollsters, who Democratic and Republican pollsters, look at a group of people who have the following characteristics. They make $75,000 or older or more. They have annual salaries, and their job can be done from home. These people are much more satisfied with their jobs, and they're much more secure in their personal financial situations. I think that's another line that we're separating. There's some 30% of the workforce that cannot do their job at home, and right now these are lower paid jobs. And I'm starting to wonder, hey, if I got to go into work now and I got to pay that money to go in, I got to physically bring myself there, I think that job is maybe worth more than it was.